Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Nut Buddy Guys Presents Andor Season 1 Rewatch. Want to apologize, I've been under the weather, so today's episode is going to be a double header, and we're going to cover episodes 5 and 6 as we move forward and finish our second arc of Andor Season 1. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it right now, starting with episode 5, The Axe Forgets. This originally aired on October 5th, 2022, written by Dan Gilroy, directed by Susan White. And these are the same individuals who were involved in episode 4. And these will be the same individuals, I believe, who are, yes, going to be in charge of episode 6 as well. So there's a little bit of consistency here when it comes to the arcs. So, summary. We are on Aldhani. Cassian is now going by Clem. He's in the process of sort of obviously hiding his past from the rebels he's met. And of course, there's a good bout of distrust going on between them, particularly Skeen. Tamarin, or his name is, trains Cassian and the other rebels in a planned heist. They march because they're going to pose as Imperial soldiers. While traveling to Aldhani Imperial garrison, so they start moving en route to go set up for the heist, Cassian ends up having to reveal he's a mercenary to kind of cover the fact that he has that Sky Stone because Skeen cuts it off him in a suspicious manner, calling him out. Fel decides to continue the mission and hold off on dealing with Clem's quote-unquote past until they have achieved their objectives. Imperial officers and double agent Lieutenant Gorm covertly aids the rebels, of course. He helps get them suits and gets them in on the thing. On Coruscant, Cyril Karm, just trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life now with his overbearing mother. And of course, Mom Mothma is in the process of establishing a new charitable foundation, because this is going to be how she's hopefully going to help smuggle money, but she's also dealing with very tense relationships between her husband and her daughter. And of course, we have ISB Supervisor Blevin seizing control of the hotel on Ferrix to act as a new ISB headquarters. Meanwhile, his rival, you can call her that, Deidre Mero, and her assistant, Hert, that's Heert, reached the conclusion that the rebels are conducting a series of coordinated heists of Imperial weapons and technology. She's actually on to what Luthen's trying to do here. And of course, we end with Lucien anxiously waiting to hear about what's going to happen. Clea has to basically tell him it's not happening tonight. So, insights here. So, it is kind of an intriguing, we see the continuing growing of instruments in the introduction with the title card of Andor. We're working towards some sort of completeness, I guess you might say. Cyril, interestingly, this is again sort of a weird sort of solitude moment. We see him in the morning, already awake and ready as the sun comes up, or at least it comes up high enough for him to be seen where he is and lives in Coruscant. We also are going to begin his quote-unquote serial fixation, as noted by other channels who studied this. Of course, we have his overbearing mother, kind of really like a really sort of hardcore trope here. Noting maybe he's not cut out to be a leader. Complicated, very demeaning, overbearing. There's a lot of tropes going on here. It gives you a lot of insight into why Cyril is kind of the way he is. Note, does he have prospects? No. So she's going to call Uncle Harlow to help him out. Cyril is ideally, hopefully, going to get a leg up from Uncle Harlow. His mom does call him, provides him with an opportunity in the bureaucracy. He had to listen in, apparently, to what his mom's conversation. And it gets kind of really messed up. And then, of course, we see him go back and he looks at the hollow. He still has the hollow of Cassian. So, again, he's still kind of fixated on this. He's obsessed. Now, the majority of this episode and almost the entirety of the next episode are going to be fixated on Aldhani and the heist. So we have Cassian, a.k.a. Clem. He's woken up. Skeen took his stuff. He's pissed about it. He finds him washing up. Claims Vel ordered him to look through his stuff. He's a very observant guy. He's kind of like a mirror version of Clem. This becomes very true in the next episode. He notices the Morlana pistol, the corporate pistol he has with him too. They talk about Skeen's tattoo, and they has a sense of recognition. Basically, time they've served in some sort of penitentiary of some kind, reform school, whatever it might be. And then there's this line where the title of the episode comes, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers." Now, it's interesting, that line, that whole phrase. It's sort of the idea that the system forgets what it does to the people it does things to, but they remember. And I think that's what the implication here is that they, the people who go through the system, remember what's done to them, while the system itself, aka the axe, doesn't remember them at all. We had this whole thing where Skeen kind of gives his weird little reasons why he wants revenge against the Empire. He also gives Clem kind of a weird rundown of the group, where we have Nemik is obviously very much a true believer. Vel and Senta are together as a couple, very observant. And Clem says he's here to win and walk away. Nemik later comes up to him and gives himself a bit of his ideals to Clem, shows him his manifesto and the navigational tool. It's an old one, but it's what he's going to use to help them navigate through the Eye of Aldhani. They talk about things with the Empire is teaching people how to forget how to do things and things they used to have, like freedom. Technology is outpacing comprehension. It's very prescient to what's going on in our own world today. And it's a very prescient statement about how authoritarian regimes engage their populations. So take with that what you will. Moreover, there's a breakdown of the mission prep. Everybody knows how they do their job. Important thing for Clem is that he is there to operate the ship, and he's able to decipher the weight-load ratio, which they apparently hadn't figured out. So it's a good thing he is there. They're doing drills, how they're going to practice as soldiers to get in, and Tamarin's helping to train them. We'll later find out his origin story and why he's so good at that. We show Lieutenant Gorn back at the garrison. He is having the guards clean up the temple area at the base of where the base is so that the pilgrims don't see it. He chews them out and all that fun stuff. We finally return to Ferrix, and this is where we get the whole aftermath of Cassian's mess being cleaned up. Particularly, we meet a captain who wants to be made a prefect and put in charge, and Levin's on site, and they're taking more direct control. Like I said, they took the HQ, the hotel, to be their HQ. They're now having a direct presence there. We then cut back as we see them, the Imperial soldiers, to Clem and the men training how to march. Noting the dominant hand issue. This is another example of Cassian / Clem being observant. He gets some, I think, Tamarin to switch places with Skeen position-wise because of the dominant hands. They also get a flyby by some TIE fighters. They have to hide the weapons, being assholes. I think Nemik makes a comment about it's easy to attack from above, but you never see the sneak attack from below. Oh, there should be. I really need to do a whole video on Nemik. The man is such a fascinating insight of ideas, full of wisdom, one-liners, so many things. Such a great character. Back at the garrison, Gorn and the comms officer are over on the dam looking over the valley. They're having a conversation about things. Back to the team. They're getting in their uniforms and materials to the heist. Clem, this is when Clem puts on the cyber crystal that he's been having in his boot, and this is what will end up having his confrontation with Skeen later. They have a little toast of the rebellion. They burn the model. They basically abandon this camp and move forward. Clem is curious about Gorn's involvement. He asks, and he finds out that apparently Gorn was in love with an Aldhani woman, and it cost him promotion and the woman, according to what Vel tells him. At the garrison, we find the hangar and the vault. We finally start seeing inside. Gorn working on a schedule for his men for the next day. Men are eager to see the eye, willing to let them go and watch. This sort of works to their advantage. Skeen, of course, figures out about the Kyber crystal. We have this whole showdown between them. Clem claims he's a mercenary. That's kind of his stuff. It reestablishes his cover. And everybody talking about, being afraid, talks of fear, says they are all afraid. Him too. Don't let illusion. This is him kind of reassuring Nemik. That night they signal Gorn that they're in position. Skeen tells Clem about his brother being a farmer, and that's part of his whole reasoning. The Imperials caused him to kill himself after losing his farm. He farmed trees. It's sort of an apology of sorts that Vel makes him tell him. And then finally, Tamarin is now fully in charge as Vel and Senta go off to prep for their part of the mission. So they're now broken up into two teams. Back on Coruscant, Mon Mothma and Perrin, her husband, are talking in their apartment. We finally meet their daughter, Lita. And Lita and Mon Mothma have a terrible relationship. It's very strained. She's much closer to her father. She's breaking plans. It's like Mon Mothma's commitment to her professional life is obviously hurting her personal life. And I'm not quite certain that her husband isn't working against her. She's very consumed on her doing her larger role and neglecting her family life. But again, like I said, I don't think Perrin's probably helping in this. Back with them, later we see them in a car together. She talks about starting a foundation, covering for money. And then, of course, going back to the ISB, we have Blevin working hard while Mira is still investigating, trying to find out her loyal lieutenant hurt. They really do know they're onto something. And they ask the question, too random to be random. They make that statement, she says. And then, so like in a weird way, she's closer to being on top of what's really going on. And then, of course, we have Luthen listening to the radio. He turns in for the night, and then that's the end of the episode. This leads us into episode 6, The Eye. So the final culmination. So originally aired October 12, 2022. Same writer, same director, Dan Gilroy, Susanna White. So, summary. Aided by Gorn, the rebels infiltrate the garrison by posing as escort squad to Commandant J-Hold Behaz, Gorn's superior at the base. They take Behaz's family and hostages and force him to give them access to the payroll vault. While loading the credits into the freighter, they are discovered by Imperial forces. Tamarin and Gorn are killed in the ensuing firefight. Cinta, unable to make it onto the ship, so only Cassian, Skeen, and Vel and Nemik escape from Aldhani. Interesting side note, I don't think Cinta was ever supposed to get on the ship. The summary says that, but I don't think she was ever actually meant to make it on there. I think she has an entirely different objective in array. Unfortunately, during takeoff, Nemik gets crushed by some unsecured credits, loaded into the vault, and suffers severe injury. He's still able to help navigate them. They land on the planet Fresino, where he's treated for Nemik is treated for his injuries. With Vel occupied looking after Nemik, Skeen proposes to Cassian that they flee and split the payroll between the two. Enraged and fearing for his life, Cassian kills Skeen. Now, this is, again, the whole element of the Dark Mirror I was talking about. He tells Vel about what happened, informs her of his plans to take him the amount he was promised in payment for his leave. He even pays the doctor for the ship he's going to take. He leaves Vel the main ship. Vel gives Cassian Nemik's manifesto in accordance with Nemik's dying wishes. And, of course, he gives her the Kyber crystal that Luthen gave him. Back on Coruscant, the ISB agents are forced to gather as a response to the Aldhani raid and come up with reprisals. And so, interesting things. Things have been set in motion. So, of course, we find at the beginning of this episode, Nemik rationalizing his perceptions about mercenaries, and he comes to the conclusion they're a positive asset, considering Cassian. And he tells him, I'm glad you're here no matter the reason. I love that line. Of course, we have Behaz on discussing the Aldhani people with this new colonel who's arrived, and talking about how the Empire manipulates them and cut pilgrims off from coming up to the specific sacred spot, how they've been slowly finding ways to distract them. Apparently, they've been occupying this planet for about 12 years, according to what was said there. And it's a very strange capitalistic manipulation they're trying here, where they've apparently managed to whittle down the numbers over the last couple of years from 500 to about 60 people. So they're planning on not allowing them back next time. So in another 3 years, they won't even be allowed back. They're literally whittling this down to nothing. Of course, he's discussing with the Colonel Engineer, Colonel Pettigar, who's come to make expansions at the base. We see Vel and Cinta have come to their location, which is on the other side of the lake from where the dam is. They're going to come across the water, and they make contact using a battle radio, using Valley 1 and Echo 1. Echo 1 is the main team with the guys who are going to go in as the soldiers, and then Vel and Cinta are the Valley 1. So Skeen tells Clem that Tamarin is an ex-stormtrooper. This is why he seems so comfortable giving orders. But interestingly enough, Cinta's whole family apparently was killed by stormtroopers, so this apparently caused some tension months back. We start seeing the first signs of the Eye beginning to manifest with shooting I would kind of say like supersonic, like almost like missile sounding things going across the atmosphere. Imperial soldiers greet the Aldhani who come up, They meet up with the Pilgrims. They fall in. They march with the Pilgrims, and this is where the Heist guys fall in as well. They're told that if someone asks them if they say they're from the garrison, they're from Al-Kinzi. If they say they're from Al-Kinzi, you say you're from the garrison. And apparently Gorn, of course, speaks the Aldani language, and he communicates with them. While this is happening, Vel and Cinta are moving across the lake. Gorn takes Squad 3. He leaves Squads 1, 2, and 4 down at the little pilgrim site and the little thing to watch. Squad 3 he assigns to the Commandant, Biaz. And that's the group with Skeen and Clem and all the guys. So the Imperials, there's a real sense they look down on these people as primitive. Trading goat hides, they kind of come off very arrogantly. The whole ceremony is performed with the natives going down while Vel and Cinta get to the top of the dam, plant Scrambler on the comms tower. And of course, while this is happening, the TIE fighters are going to be grounded as well anyway. Vel is quite nervous, almost seems like she's going to lose her nerve. Gorn even lies when they're translating the Commandant. The Aldani leader seems to note this. He actually says something that looks like a threat, and when Gorn translates it as a blessing, the Aldani leader seems to note this. Of course, Gorn leads Clems and his men back to the base with the Commandant. Gorn sends more men down to the ceremony, keeping only the Heist infiltrators on point. Once inside, they're taking the plan in action, taking the family hostage. The colonel resists and pulls out his pistol. Thankfully, Cinta arrives in time, and he shoots him before he can shoot Nemik. Commandant's just taken by Tamarin and Clem. They go up. Of course, the jammer that Vel puts in kicks in the comms, and the comm officer up there is still trying to figure out what's going on. They take over a control room. They tie up the family. The Commandant is taken down to the vault. They lead him down there initially like he's coming down with them on formation. Cinta stays up in the control room with everyone else. They would then march down with the Commandant, the men, puts them in on inspection, then takes them and uses them when they grab them hostage to load up. Commandant's always urging cooperation. They're using hostages to help load. Nemik gets the navigation ready. Clem gets the ship ready for launch. Imperial comms guy stumbles upon the Heist channel. Searching for this communication, Al-Kanzi Air Base calls in about the vault breach, because when they do that, it does set that off. Sent there to kill the power when this happens. Comms men going to, guys are gathering. There's a few more of them are going down to the vault. Gorn en route there. There's a lot of tension building. Is this going to work? Is it not going to work? The eye begins to pick up. Very majestic sight. Beautiful sight. Commandant sees that Gorn has betrayed him. Al-Kinzi is now scrambling their fighters. They know something's wrong. Everything is going as planned when basically the Commandant suffers a heart attack and the other men arrive, and this creates the shootout. In the shootout, Clem gets to the ship ready to fly. Tamarin gets killed trying to help Val. Nemik saves Clem. Gorn gets killed in the shootout. Only Clem, Vel, and Skeen make it onto the ship. When they launch, this is when the whole incident happens where Nemik is critically hurt, but they give him a stabilizer, and he's still able to help them navigate and get them through the eye, which the TIE fighters don't make it. That was funny. Of course, Cinta walks out just past the Pilgrims as the eye finishes. No one there seems to know even what's happened back inside. Clem, Vel, and Skeen ultimately escape. They make it to this doctor that Skeen and Clem basically fight for. While they're there, this is when Skeen reveals his true color. He's looking at about 80 million credits, looking to split it with them. Reveals the whole story about his brother was a lie. And he thinks Clem is just like him, do the job and get out. He needs him because he needs a pilot. But then Clem kills him. Little hesitation. I think he sees exactly what Skeen is, and that he's dangerous to be left alive. Like I said, he's like a dark mirror of what Cassian could have been. Of course, Nemik unfortunately dies. He leaves his manifesto to Clem. Vel lets him go. He takes his cut. He bails on the other ship, pays it, like I said, gives the Kyber back. And back on Coruscant, the ISB is on alert. Mon Mothma's in the middle of a speech about the Gormans. When the senators get news of the raid, And Clea and Luthen are in the shop when they hear about it, and Luthen goes back and he has this ecstatic moment of just like pure joy because he knows something is now happening. And I want to make a quick note here before I let this big double episode go. Something struck me the other day about how this show handles the idea of sparking a rebellion versus the sequel trilogy, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. And that they are, and maybe I'll make another video on this alone, but what's so fascinating about how that series is it's very one-dimensional in how they think a rebellion gets started. They need a spark. They have to cause a spark. This is the spark. They're going to do this. Luke Skywalker coming back is going to be the spark. It gets real lame and almost cringe. But when you see it done here in Andor, you see that it's not about hoping for some spark. It's about making things happen that cause other things to happen because you don't know where the spark is. But you know if you do this, it'll cause this. And then that might cause a spark. It's like striking flint and watching the sparks fly on the dry dust. You don't know which is going to catch. So food for thought there. Other than that, please like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Let me know your thoughts. I apologize. I'm glad we got this double episode in. Hopefully we're back on track. Hopefully now that this sinus infection is starting to clear up, we'll get back on our regular track. So next time we'll be looking at episode 7, the announcement, as we move into our third arc. As we now are moving closer to getting up to ready for season 2. If you want to follow along on our podcast, we have 2 of them going up and a third one possibly on the way. We have our Off the Reels where we're still dealing with the Rambo movies. And we have another one, Wrestling with the Horror of It All, where you can find Casey and my colleagues, Casey and Eric, talking about wrestling and horror movies. So check those out. Links in the description below. Until then, I will see you next time. I'm still working on a catchphrase to close these things out. Maybe I'll have one next time then too. Until then, stay safe. Say not funny guys again.
Not funny guys again.
No, can you say not funny guys?